Hi, good day everyone. This is Sir Jet and welcome to another episode of The Contemporary World. Today, we will begin the series on snapshots of the different continents. To begin with, let's start at home. Let's start with our backyard, Asia. Now, the purpose of this series is to give you a little peek at what is happening in every corner of the world. It's not necessarily a big lesson on what is happening on everything, but just a little corner of the world that would represent the continent. So, in the next several meetings, we will be like having a field trip around the world. We will be visiting the 7 continents, and we will see the probably one issue, just one big issue happening in that continent for us to have a feel or have a picture of what is in that continent. And when we put everything together, then we will have a big picture of the contemporary world. So this is the last part of our term. Okay, so to begin with, let's go to our screen. All right. So let me bring it closer to you. Okay, there. So for Asia, okay, the snapshot that we will be talking about is the Judeo-Palestinian Conflict. Now, what exactly is this? Now, when we say Judeo, that means the Jews, the people in Israel, and they call themselves Jews. Their religion is Judaism. And they have a conflict with another people group called the Palestinians. Okay, so the Palestinians call their country Palestine. And as you can see here in our map, okay, that there's a conflict between the Israelis and the Palestinians. In fact, they are living on the same piece of land. Okay, this dagger-shaped piece of land in the Middle East is called Palestine by the Palestinians, and it's called Israel by the Israelis. Okay, so it's just like having two families living in the same house. Can you imagine that? Two families, and they live and use the same bathroom, dining room, sala, and so there is conflict. And as you can see here in the transition, way back in 1946, the green shade there represents the land that was controlled by the Palestinians, and the white is the land controlled by the Israelis. And as you can see, as time progresses, the green shrinks to what is now just a little part of the big land, and the white shade grows. And so at present, it's the Israelis who are in control of most of the land, while the Palestinians are the minority. Flashback 50 years ago, it's the other way around. Okay, now, what is the root of this conflict? Why are they fighting? What kind of fight are they doing? Well, it's a very violent fight. It's a war. And what's the bone of contention? So, as you can see, it's a battle or it's a war that is rooted in religion. So the Arabs are Muslims, and the Jews, their religion is called Judaism. And they have different religions, they have conflict. They also belong to a different race. So the Jews, that's one separate race from the Arabs. So in other words, they are different, but they are living in the same land. And their conflict is who should own the promised land. For the Jews, they call that piece of land, okay, the promised land. They call it Israel, or in ancient times, they call it Canaan, spelled as Canaan, but they pronounce it as Canaan. While the Palestinians call this piece of land Palestine. Okay? So the Palestinians are Arabs. Okay? So there are several kinds of Arabs. Okay? There are Arabs from Saudi Arabia, Arabs from UAE, okay? Arabs from Yemen, and Palestinians is just one kind of Arab. While the Jews and the Israelis, they are synonymous. Okay, Jews are Israelis, Israelis are Jews. Okay, so there's a conflict happening in the Middle East. Now, let me take you to the root of the problem. Okay, what's the source, or how did it all begin? Now, for us to understand the root of the issue, we have to have a little Bible study. Okay, we will consult history as foretold by the Bible, because that's where the problem all began. And both the Jews and the Arabs know this story because it is their story. So the Jews, they look at Abraham as their father, the source of their race. And the Arabs too believe the same. The Arabs also believe that Abraham is their father. Okay, so it all started with Abraham, the common ancestor of the Jews and the Arabs. Now, how did that happen? Abraham becoming the father of all the Jews, or ancestor rather, of all the Jews, and also of all the Arabs. Now, who is Abraham? Let's focus on his character. He is a Sumerian. Okay? He lives in a land called Sumeria. Now, that is not in the Philippines. You might be thinking of Samar. No, not Samar, but Sumeria. It's somewhere in present-day Iraq. Okay, so this is the time when the word Jew or Arab is not yet existing. So people are just simply called Sumerians, okay? Those who are living in present-day Iraq. And Abraham was one of them. Now, one day, God called Abraham to migrate to Canaan. Okay, again, Canaan is the name of the land which is now called Israel or Palestine. And so, from present-day Iraq to present-day Israel, okay, God ordered this guy, Abraham, to travel, to migrate to that land because that is called the Promised Land. God ordered Abraham, or God promised Abraham, that his new homeland shall be Canaan and not Sumeria. Now, this is the map showing his travel. Okay, can you see it? Now, the green portion here, okay, is called the Fertile Crescent. So a crescent is a moon that is shaped like this, as letter C, okay? Because It's called because it's shaped like a crescent. Now, why is it called fertile? Because that's the only place in the Middle East that is fertile, where you can plant crops. Because all the other area around the Fertile Crescent is desert. And so Abraham is living here in a city called Ur. Okay, Ur or U-R, spelled as U-R, pronounced as Ur. And this is in Sumeria. Okay. And this is Canaan over here, the one indicated by the box. So he has to travel all the way along the Fertile Crescent, not across the desert, because that's very tiring and you might die and get lost in the desert. So he has to traverse the Fertile Crescent and go down here to the Promised Land. Okay? Now he has to walk because there's no tricycle yet at that time. Okay? And so Abraham began his journey from Ur to Canaan. Now, part of the promise is that of God to Abraham is that he would be the father of many nations. Okay? God said, look at the stars. Do you see how many they are? That's how many your descendants shall be. And so Abraham couldn't believe God's promise because he was very old at that time. He was 75 years old. He has a wife named Sarah who was also very old and was barren or infertile. She couldn't give birth. So she has a physical defect or incapacity to bring forth babies. She's barren. And so Abraham couldn't believe that God would make him the father of many nations. It doesn't make sense for him. And also for Sarah, she couldn't believe God's promise. So they put things in their own hands. Okay, by the way, this is in the book of Genesis in the Bible. If you want to read it yourself, you can consult your Bible. In the Old Testament, the first book, Genesis, you can find the story of Abraham. Now, Sarah put things in her own hands. She made a little plan on how Abraham would have children. And you know the plan? It's kind of weird because she gave her slave girl to Abraham, told them to sleep together and have a baby together. Because Sarah couldn't give birth, she thought that maybe a younger woman would be the key on how to have many babies for Abraham. Okay? And so the name of the servant girl is Hagar. Okay? So Hagar and Abraham had a son. And the name of the son is Ishmael. Okay, so there, Abraham had his first son, but not from his real wife, but from the servant girl Hagar. Okay, now Ishmael, you can see there in the picture. Okay, Ishmael was the son of Hagar, and after he was born, Sarah was a little bit jealous, okay, because the attention of Abraham is always now on the boy Ishmael. Now later on, a miracle happened. Sarah bore a child too, and they named him Isaac. So now Abraham had two sons, Ishmael and Isaac. Now because Sarah is now so jealous of Hagar and Ishmael, she sent them away from Abraham. And so Hagar and her son Ishmael lived in the desert. Okay? And they became the descendants of the Arab nations. Okay, you get it? So Ishmael, the son of Abraham, from the servant girl Hagar, became the father or the descendant of the Arabs, the Palestinians, the Saudis, okay, and all the other Arabs living in the Middle East. They trace their ancestry from Ishmael, the son of Abraham. Now, on the other hand, Isaac's descendants became the nation of Israel. So the Jews, the Israelites, they trace their ancestry from Isaac, the son of Abraham. So as you can see, they are brothers, okay? Half brothers. And so their common father was Abraham. Now, throughout the centuries, these descendants of Ishmael and Isaac fought one another for the control and ownership of Canaan. They claim the land, okay? And they say that it's my father's land, so it should be mine. Now, the other guy is also saying the same. Abraham is also my father, and so I must have this land as an inheritance. And through the centuries, that's the conflict. The Palestinians and the Israelis up to today are fighting over the ownership of that piece of land, Canaan, which is present-day Israel or Palestine. Okay, so as you can see in the picture, this is an Israeli policeman and there's a Palestinian civilian. Because right now, the one who are in control of Israel, the state of Israel, are the Israelis. Okay, they are the ones who are the politicians or the prime minister, the lawmakers. Okay, and they also have their own police, and the Palestinians are just one of the civilian groups in the state of Israel. And so there are rallies almost every day. The Palestinians want freedom, or they want the Israelis out of their land. And the Israelis also feel the same. So that's how troublesome that place is today. You can read that in the news. Now, in the modern times, the United Nations gave the land of Canaan to the Jews in 1948. This is the map I showed you a while ago. Okay? So, in the many centuries before 1946 or 1948, this piece of land was governed by the Muslims, okay, by the Arabs, the Palestinians, and the Jews were all over the world. They were evicted. As you can see, the brown areas, that's only the place where they have control. Just little pockets in a big green field called Palestine, ruled by the Palestinians. The rest of the Jews were in Europe, in America, some are in Africa, and they have been there for centuries. They were a scattered people. Now, in 1948, or after World War II, the United Nations made a proclamation or a plan to divide the promised land. Okay, this is the plan, the United Nations plan of 1947. So there would be more or less an equal share of the land. Some would be orange, some would be green, and the green would be the Palestinian controlled areas, while the orange would be the Jewish controlled areas. And so the United Nations called all the Jews to come home, okay, from all over the world. They come home and build their homes in the promised land. And they told the Palestinians to make room, okay? So just settle in those green areas and make room for the homecoming Jews. Now that happened in the 1940s. Now from 1949 to 1967, the Jews were so many that they occupied more than half of the original UN plan. As you can see, okay, the Palestinians got concentrated in just two areas. The one near the sea called Gaza Strip, and this one near the Jordan River. This is the river, and this is east, this is west. So this is called West Bank. Okay, West Bank of the Jordan River. So the Palestinians lived in two areas of the Promised Land, the West Bank and Gaza Strip. Okay? But through the decades, the Israelites or the Israelis gained more and more control of these areas of the West Bank, and what we have today is a very, very small area that the Palestinians live in. They still have Gaza Strip, but for the West Bank, it's more or less occupied now by the Israelis. Okay, so that's what is happening there. Now, the Palestinians and the other Arab nations think that what the United Nations did was illegal. And they are hoping that one day the Jews would be evicted from Palestine. That's why there are a lot of demonstrations, as you can see in the picture. The Palestinians wanted the Israelis to be evicted because they say they are the real owners of the land. And so sometimes it's more than a demonstration or more than a rally. Sometimes there would be bombings, suicide bombings, like a Palestinian freedom fighter would wrap himself with bombs and then go to a crowded palenque of the Jews and blow himself up, and therefore killing Jews together with him. And that's a very that's not a very nice idea, of course, but it happens, you know. And they hate one another, okay? The Jews and the Palestinians. Now the Arabs also hate not only the Jews but also the United States for supporting Israel. We all know that the United States is one of the strongest allies of Israel. And so the Arabs felt that the U.S. is too much, you know, going out of their country and going to the Middle East to be the world policeman or the universe's policeman. And so the Arabs also hate, or the Arabs are the ones who hate, the Arabs hate the U.S. for supporting Israel. Remember the 9/11 attack? And also Saddam Hussein's war versus the U.S., or the U.S.'s war versus Saddam Hussein. So it's it's connected. It has some connection to the hate of the Arabs on the U.S. Now, what's the situation right now? If we would have a field trip to Israel, okay, we can see that much of the land of Israel is controlled by the Israelis, but not Jerusalem, which is their most important, most holy city. And in that city of Jerusalem is the Temple Mount, and it's not controlled by the Jews, it's controlled by the Muslims. So this is the city of Jerusalem. It's on a mountain, okay? And on top of the mountain, this is called the Temple Mount. And so the city is subdivided. We have the Muslim quarter here and the Jewish quarter here. And this is the most important piece of land for the Israelis because this is the site of their temple. If you would read the Bible, they used to have a big temple here built by King Solomon, and that's where they had the grand praise and worship. And that temple stood for many, many centuries, got destroyed, got rebuilt during Jesus' time. And that's also the place where in Jesus' time, it's also mentioned there that he used to go around that place. But right now, what we have here is not a Jewish temple, but a Muslim mosque. Because for centuries, it's the Muslims who governed, it's the Arabs who governed the Promised Land, including the city of Israel. And this piece of land, okay, the Muslims built their own place of worship, and they call it the Dome of the Rock. That is a mosque. And for the Jews, they don't like that. Okay? So this city is controlled by the Palestinians, and the most important piece of land is controlled by the Palestinians, and the Jews wanted them evicted. And once they are evicted, the Jews would build their own temple on that piece of land. Okay? So, can you just imagine the tension? It's like a telenovela. You know, some family would be quarreling because of inheritance, of who owns the large mansion. And so one group says, my father owns that, so I should be the rightful heir of that property. And then another guy would pop up and say, we too are children of that rich man. So there's trouble. Real life trouble in Israel. So right now, since as you can see, Israel is in control of much of Israel, except Jerusalem. As you can see in the picture a while ago, the temple is not owned, or the place where the temple used to be is not owned by the Israelis. But they own much of the land. Now there are little patches of green for the Palestinians, and they allowed them an autonomous government. They allowed the Palestinians to have their own leaders, elect their own leaders, and have their own police, have their own budget, and make little laws for their little place. That's called autonomy. Now, similarly, in the Philippines, we have a couple of autonomous regions. So they also have there in Israel. Now, take note that an autonomous region or an autonomous government is not a state, because they lacked one element of the state, which is sovereignty. They have people, okay? They have territory. They have their autonomous government, All right, so that's 1, 2, 3 elements of the state, but sovereignty, they don't have that because Israel is the sovereign in their autonomous region. Now, a little perk is that the Palestinians are allowed to participate in sports events, in the Olympics and other sports events, and carry the name Palestine. As you can see in this picture, he has in his jersey Palestine. And this is a weightlifter in the Tokyo Olympics. And he's carrying the flag of Palestine in the awarding ceremony. Okay, so that's the most freedom the Israeli government can give to the Palestinians. But they say we are still sovereign. Okay, now, recently, in May 2021, hostilities began anew because the Palestinians, okay, they are ruled by a political party called Hamas, and these people wanted the Israelis to be evicted from the promised land, so the Palestinians would be the ones ruling the place all for themselves. So they secretly made plans and stocked up some war materials, and one day launched a surprise attack on Israel. They launched rockets, and you know, these are missiles. When they hit a building or a piece of town, it will be pulverized. Okay, over here, okay, that's where the Hamas missile base is located, and they launched those missiles intended for the Israeli community here. But to the world's surprise, the Israelis has an antidote for that. They have a technology that they can intercept the missiles launched by the Hamas or the Palestinians. Okay, you can see here. So these are rockets that would meet the Palestinian rockets launched from here, and this is the Israeli rockets. And before the Palestinian rockets would land here, they would be blown up in the air by the Israeli rockets. Fantastic. Amazing. That's a high technology warfare for you. And so what happened after that hostile attack? There's a ceasefire. Okay, so the plan to evict the Israelis didn't materialize, and so Israel is still ruling Israel. All right. Now for the Jews, for the non-Jews and the non-Muslims, okay, they hope that there would be peace. They hope that one day the Jews and the Muslims, or the Jews and the Palestinians, would come to an agreement and have peace in the region. That's the hope of all the rest of the world for these two people. But for the Jews and the Palestinians, they believe that time will never happen. For the Jews, they say that peace can only happen if all of Israel's enemies would be gone. And that's the same thing that the Palestinians feel. There would only be peace in Palestine if the Jews would be evicted from their land. And that's very sad, you know. But what can we do? So right now, these two people continue to live in tension. Okay, you have your neighbor, one village belongs to a different group, you belong to a different group, you meet together in the mall. I don't know if they are also classmates in school or they ride the same bus. So there's tension. And that's the Judeo-Palestinian conflict. The little peek on what is happening on this part of Asia. And you should know this because it's in the news. Almost every day we see this in the news. Some demonstration or bombing happening in Israel. And at least now you know the reason for those violent stories. Okay, so this is our lesson for today. We have visited a little part of Asia. Next meeting, we will visit another continent and have a snapshot of it. Thank you very much. This is Sir Jet saying goodbye and thank you.